All right, it's hour number 2 on San Diego Sports Leader XX1090. Darren Smith as we get back in with you. Up until 5 o'clock, Hacksaw at that time. First hour of the program, talked a little bit off the top about Chargers-Broncos schedule, spent a little time on college football with Marquise Lee from USC, who I thought was solid, legitimate Heisman candidate, and USC clearly is promoting that. Let us turn our attention here locally to San Diego State basketball. We've got a couple games now in the books. We had the Syracuse game, the battle on the Midway to talk about. We talked a little bit about that on Monday and a little bit about that yesterday. Last night, San Diego State went out there. They played their first home game technically. They win 91-57 over San Diego Christian. And joining us now, as he will throughout the course of the season, as time permits, on Wednesdays is Brian Dutcher. He's the assistant head basketball coach and the head coach in waiting with the Aztecs. We need to come up with a shorter way to say that, Dutch.
AHCCIW, Darren.
What is it again?
The AHCCIW, Associate Head Coach, Coach in Waiting.
Okay.
It's an abbreviation.
Okay, AHC. Is that what it says on the card there so that we can shorten it up a little bit?
They don't make a card big enough to get that on there.
Is that what it says on the office door?
You could just call me Assistant Head Coach. The coach in waiting is wonderful, but it does sound kind of funny every time they say it.
Well, I do like throwing that in there because it means something, and I would think for a lot of people, and knowing how dirty sometimes the recruiting business can be. Come on, Dutch, you've been out there for years out on the recruiting trails. I would think that the whole head coach in waiting thing is probably reassuring for a lot of people when you walk into a kid's home and try to recruit them.
Absolutely, because everyone wants to say Coach Fisher's retiring, and who are you gonna play for? So that does give us a little bit of advantage in the recruiting trails where Coach Fisher can say, in all honesty, I don't know how long I'm staying, but when I decide to leave, this will be your head coach.
I think,
and I may not leave. I may be here all 4 years, but if I decide to retire, it'll be on my terms, and this will be the guy you're playing for. So as a recruiting advantage, it definitely helps the Aztecs.
It's one of those spots, though, where, in college football, the University of Texas did this. And I don't mean to take us off on an aside here, because I know we have basketball to talk about. But the University of Texas tried this with Will Muschamp, and he ended up taking the job in Florida. Do people ever wonder about that? Do they ever wonder or worry that it's just a title and name only?
Circumstances are different for every person, obviously. And obviously Will Muschamp felt that he didn't want to wait any longer and that the Florida job was just too good for him to pass up. And so every circumstance is different. I'm completely happy here. It doesn't mean that people won't call and ask about me, which is very flattering. But, we've been on the Mesa 14 years. I love being an Aztec, and I love this university and this program.
Great answer there. Brian Dutcher joining us on San Diego Sports Leader XX1090. Well, let's go back over the weekend there, Dutch. You guys, obviously, you play a tough Syracuse team. They're ranked in the top 10. They were in the Elite Eight last year, like we talked about last week. But give us an idea from a bigger sense and a broader perspective. What was it like being involved in that game? How enjoyable was it despite the outcome?
Let's just talk about the 6 teams that were invited to play on aircraft carriers. We got Georgetown, Ohio State, Marquette, Florida, Syracuse, and San Diego State. So just that alone shows the feeling people have about us nationally that we're included in that company. It was an honor to play on the aircraft carrier, to play on the Midway. And we knew going in it wasn't going to be a perfect environment game. And when we found out our opponent, we knew it was even going to be worse. Of all the teams we could have picked to play, which we had no decision, Syracuse would have been the last. A team that's big, plays zone, and knowing that last year the teams that played on the aircraft carrier couldn't shoot from the outside, it made our task even tougher. So the opponent was tough, the environment tough, but the event was over-the-top great.
Would you do it again?
Absolutely. In a second, I would. Now, maybe some of the players that couldn't make a shot, they might say, hey, let's think about that. But from a coaching standpoint, and I think nationally, you look, we didn't drop hardly at all in the rankings. We're up there. People knew the environment was tough. It wasn't a true gymnasium setting or arena setting where the outcome might have been a little different. And they know that. The people that vote on the polls that know basketball know what kind of environment we were playing, and it didn't hurt us nationally from a perception standpoint.
And I also would think, Dutch, that now that you guys have really established yourself as a perennial contender and a team that's going to go to the NCAA tournament, you don't have all that much to lose. Whereas maybe 6, 7, 8 years ago, when you're trying to scratch and claw, maybe the dynamic's a little bit different.
Oh, absolutely. 6, 7 years ago, they wouldn't invite us to play on the aircraft carrier. So right now, I mean, they thought they wouldn't have picked us unless they thought the matchup was going to be competitive and well fought, and it was for the most part. Unfortunately, we fell behind early and then played them even, but even wasn't enough. I think we played them 45-45 the last X amount of minutes of the game, but to fall behind 17-4, we just could never get over that hurdle.
Well, do you take any positives away from that game? Is there anything that you could look at on film, on tape, and say, from a coaching staff, this is really the takeaway. This is the stuff that we want to teach our kids?
Absolutely. I mean, to get 20 offensive rebounds against Syracuse, that's unheard of. That will probably be the high they give up all year, would be my guess. And to shoot 33 free throws. Granted, we didn't make them in the environment we were playing in, but to get to the line 33 times with them knowing we had to drive the ball, that might be a high against them this year. So we did some things this year that even though it didn't show in a victory, it showed positives for what we have to work with this season, with a team that can get to the basket, draw contact, that can crash the glass, and those are all positives that we will build upon.
Do you learn more from a loss against a team like that or against a win against an opponent last night that's not a Division I program?
Oh, I think you're definitely going to learn more from the Syracuse loss than the win last night. Last night was good to get the confidence back up, get the shot grooved in where it wasn't high pressure, work on a few things and try to get back into your rhythm a little bit inside. And I thought last night's game accomplished that the guys were feeling good about themselves when they walked out of the gym. And now we're going to prepare for our first tough road battle this year. And it'll be less about the opponent than it will be in the environment, our first road environment.
I was watching on TV last night, and I saw you, by the way, at halftime do an interview. That was a new twist. I don't know how did they get you how did they rope you into that one?
Well, they wanted to catch me on the way out, but no one was there, so they caught me on the way back in, and I got a headset on, and I got a visit with Michael Cage and Eddie, and how great was that?
It was fantastic, and I just want you to know that I was watching. And I also noticed, and I don't know if you saw this or not, but at the end of the game, they interviewed Jamal Franklin. And Eddie says to him, he goes, "Hey, smile. You just had a great night. You smile a little bit." And Franklin literally said something to this effect, Coach. He goes, I don't do the smiling all that much. And I thought it was an interesting line from Franklin. Is he like that? I mean, is he all business all the time? Is that just kind of his personality? Because that's almost verbatim what he said when he was, he was told what his stat line was, and he was said, "Come on, smile a little bit." And he goes, "Nah, I don't do the smiling all that much." Is he like that around the other guys?
I think he's like that a lot on the floor, but off the floor, he's got a contagious smile and personality. He's entertaining. He's funny. He's got a great sense of humor. But when he steps across that baseline and steps onto the floor, it's all business with Jamal. And I think part of the problem with Syracuse, he wants it so desperately that the harder he squeezed, the further it got away from him. So I think he really pressed too hard against Syracuse, and he has a tendency to do that because he wants to make up for his last mistake, and he just is a competitor to no end, and he's competing all the time when he's on that floor.
So he's a grinder.
He is a grinder.
And in a good way, though. I mean, could that ever work against a guy? I mean, could a guy ever, if he's a grinder and he has that kind of personality, do you ever want to tell him to lighten up a little bit?
Well, it works against him a little bit in Syracuse. He made a mistake. He wanted to make up for it, and he made his next mistake. And it's like something where you're trying to grab a feather so hard that you can never get it. It keeps floating away, and I think that's what Jamal did against Syracuse. The harder he grabbed for it, the further it got away from him. So I think as Jamal learns to control his emotions and plays a little bit more within himself, that he'll play his best basketball, which we've obviously seen here on the Mesa Conference MVP last year.
All right, I don't want to it's only 2 games in, and as they would say in baseball, it's a small sample size. At what point should I ask you about missed free throws? Should I give it another couple games?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, obviously, it's a concern of ours. We've got to step in there and shoot a higher percentage. Now, we have guys on the team that have struggled traditionally from the foul line, and they've got to get a little better. But the guys that shoot normally 70, 80%, we got to count on those guys to shoot the percentage they've shot in the past.
Okay, so we'll give it a couple more games before we worry that this is a trend. It's just a couple games at this point, one of which was outside.
We'll really talk about it if it costs us a game, but until that point, we'll lightly talk about it.
All right, fair enough. And obviously, I know you're prohibited from saying certain things, but as far as it goes with Winston Shepard, was this a big surprise for you guys? Had you guys known about this for a while? Is this a big blow here that you're going to be without him for the next 3 games?
You know, it's going to hurt not to have Winston, and it's as much for him getting game minutes and continue to grow his game. As a team, I think we'll be able to function in the short term without him. Obviously, we feel bad for Winston. He committed an infraction that was unintentional, and was not even aware he was in the wrong. But obviously, with the NCAA rule book, we all have to be vigilant and know what the rules are, and we're appealing the decision the NCAA made of the 3-game suspension. We just think that it was such, more of a unintentional thing that wasn't even aware was a violation. But it's the rules we all deal with, and you see it around the country, and sometimes players have to sit.
Is there any reason for concern with him so far from the beginning of his Aztec career?
No, I think Winston's playing really well. He's a gifted athlete. I mean, he really attacked Syracuse down low, and unfortunately, he wasn't quite ready to deal with that size and strength. But he's played against great competition all through his high school career. He makes the adjustments necessary, and I think he's going to be an outstanding player for the Aztecs this year.
All right. Well, Dutch, thank you very much. Appreciate the time as always. And boy, you're doing all the post-game interviews. I heard you on with Teddy over the weekend. Saw you doing the halftime stuff. You're doing this radio show today. You're becoming a media star in this town.
Well, maybe you and I will get our own show someday.
Yeah, well, boy, oh boy, things will have gone tragically wrong for you in that department, won't they? Thank you, Dutch.
All right, Darren.
See ya. Brian Dutch, our assistant head basketball coach, head coach in waiting, the AHCHCIW.